Hi, this is Patricia Stepler with your Inside Power, and welcome to the show where we want you to realize that you have the powers inside of you to create your own reality and to change your life. So my question today was about, your results. What are your results? You see, when we look at our results, we can tell what our thinking is. And if you keep getting the same results over and over again, that's because you're allowing that result to control your thinking. Well, why are you doing it? Well, that's the way we've been programmed. We're programmed to look at our results, and then that becomes who we are. Why? Why does that have to become who we are? Our results should be an evaluation of what's happened, but we get the choice to decide whether they're going to define us as to who we are. See, if we create our own reality, then what we're saying is that the results is just one piece. So you look at your results and you decide, do I like those results or not? Well, if you don't like the results, decide what results you do want and start thinking about that result. What you have to realize is that we interact with the world through our senses, and that all goes into our conscious mind. And our conscious mind has a filter on it. Once you get to be about 8 or 9 years old, your conscious mind now has a filter, and you get to decide whether you agree with that or you disagree with that. That's, again, your choice. And so what happens, though, is our habitual thought patterns are all in our subconscious mind. And it's the subconscious mind that puts us into action. This is why, when you get it ready in the morning, and I know I've used this example before, but when you get ready in the morning, you get to decide, okay, I'm going to get up. And you just start going through the motions. You're not sitting there thinking about what you have to do next. You just go into a process. And again, that's been programmed into our minds. And that programming can be good and can be bad. I remember a couple times when I was working for someone else, and I would be driving down the interstate, and I would get off at the wrong exit. Like, let's say I was going to the mall, which was 2 exits below where I would get off to go to work. And sometimes going to the mall, I'd get off like I was going to work because I wasn't thinking. It was so habitual. And that's what happens to us. We have these patterns that are very habitual. And some scientists say between 90 and 95%, I've heard even as high as 97% of what we do each day is habitual. Now, you might say that's not true because maybe I work with different clients or I have different projects. And I understand what you're saying there. The processes you use are very habitual. Yes, each conversation may be different, but the processes are habitual. So if so much of our day is habitual, then we've been programmed. So our results become a reflection of the programming that we're under. So if you want to change the results, you have to change the programming. That's something I'm not actually getting into today, but if you'd like to have some information about that, please reach out to me, and I'll be glad to send you some information about how to change your programming. So what I want to talk about today is the limitations that we put on ourselves, because again, that's part of our programming. So we have to start thinking beyond our limitations. I remember I had a client, they said, I don't really think I have any limiting beliefs. I believe I can do anything I want to do. And that became true until we got to the point where I was really testing that person's limiting beliefs. And we discovered they did have limiting beliefs. See, they thought they could do anything they wanted, therefore they had no limiting beliefs. But their limiting beliefs came with how much money they thought they could earn, how many, whatever they were doing. I don't want to disclose anything, but whatever they were doing, how many of that they could do in a month. That's where their limiting beliefs were. It wasn't that they didn't believe they could do something. They just had limiting beliefs. So, there's limiting beliefs pop up at different times. So when you don't think you have one, maybe you do. It's just maybe buried a little there. Your thoughts and your attitudes will create the reality that you want. Your thoughts and your attitudes, people pick up attitudes from the vibration that you're in. They can pick up whether you're feeling really good or you're feeling really bad. They can pick up whether you're excited, whether you're not excited, whether you're miserable. People pick up your vibration. You're giving out vibrations all the time. What kind of vibrations are you giving to somebody else? And then we pick up those vibrations. This is how we sometimes protect ourselves. I remember a friend of mine was telling me about being in the elevator with somebody, and she didn't feel comfortable around that person. Well, later found out that that person was actually a criminal, and she picked up on their vibration just from being in the elevator with them. So we're sending out those vibrations all the time. But the root causes of our results is our habitual thinking. And that can be good or bad. So if you're not getting the results you want, you must change the habitual thought patterns that you have. It's the only way. How do we change them? Spaced repetition is the best way. Sometimes we change by something drastic happening. And when something drastic happens in our lives, it changes everything. That generally is not a good thing that happens. So 9/11 was an example of something that was very drastic, changed people's thought patterns immediately. A friend of mine, acquaintance, I'll say, they were on vacation and their car got hit, killed their son. That changed their whole pathway as to what they were doing next. So sometimes those things happen, but it's generally not a good thing. So if it's not something drastic, the only way to change habitual pattern is by spaced repetition. This is where meditation comes in so handy, because when you meditate, or when you're visualizing, or when you're allowing your mind to be opened, hypnosis, open your mind to new suggestions, and you do this on a continuous basis, daily, spaced repetition, that's when you start to change. So you want a new goal, you start seeing yourself already having achieved that goal. And every time you think about your goal, you see yourself having achieved it. Then eventually it has to happen, because that's the law. So when it doesn't happen, it's because you're not following the law. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I wanted to do corporate training. I'd gone to this seminar one day and I saw this guy, training the room full of people. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And it wasn't the right time at that point for me to do that, because my children were younger and it required a lot of traveling, and it just wasn't the right time. But I thought someday I want to do that. So I kind of stuck that in the back of my head. Well, when my children had all gotten older and were no longer at home, I thought, here's my chance to try this. So every day I went into work, I pretended I was going into a hotel room, conference room, or, some set, conventional type convention room, and that I was training in a corporation. Well, it wasn't too long till I was like, okay, so now I need to apply to these places, and now I need to make a video. And so I made a video. My husband recorded it, sent it to these companies. And it wasn't too long till I heard from one. They said, oh, sorry, not interested. Another one said, we don't have any openings right now. Please send in 6 months. And the company that I really wanted to work for, I didn't hear from. And so one day my phone rang, and sure enough, it was them. And they said, we saw your video. I'd like to critique it with you, and we'd like you to come work for us. See, but every day I went in there, I kept thinking I was talking to a room full of adults and training them. So I wanted a different result. And that's the way it happens. It's the law. So if you want greater abundance, because we have been focusing a little on finance and money in the last couple of weeks. So if you want more abundance, you have to start thinking abundance. You can't think lack and limitation. You can't look at your bank account as being empty and there's still more days in a month before you get paid. You have to start looking at the abundance that you have. You have to start seeing your bank account as just dollars overflowing. And they're just like falling out because there's so many dollars in there. You have to start seeing those bills as paid in full, boom, gone. And you have to start believing that it's going to happen. You see, belief is a major part of this. You must believe. So you think and you see that and you have that belief, and then it must happen. That's the law. So give yourselves new ideas and try something different. Now, one of the things Napoleon Hill said in Thinking Grow Rich is that wishing will not bring riches. It can't be a mere wish. You have to have a burning desire. You have to be ready to receive it. Well, how are you going to be ready to receive it if you don't actually believe it's going to happen? So you have to have that belief, not just more wish and hope. You've got to be committed to what it is that you want. So the attitude is our only thing we control. We can control our thinking and our mind and our attitude. So we have the ability to think the way we want to think. That doesn't mean we will. And I know I've shared this in other ones, but this is such a good quote. I just want to give it to you one more time. I'll probably give it to you more than that. But in Wallace D. Wallace's book, The Science of Getting Rich, the one thing he talks about is thinking. To think what we want to think is to think truth regardless of appearance. So you want to think what it is that you want. So if it's abundance, if it's that bank account overflowing with, tens of thousands of dollars in there, there's just so much money in there. And it's like, what am I going to spend this on? If that's what you want to think, and the truth is you got a zero balance in there, which one are you going to focus on? Focus on the abundance. Focus on seeing all that money in there and just like floating dollars all over the place. He says, every man has a natural and inherent power to think what he wants to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think thoughts which are suggested by appearances. It's very easy to think of the balance you actually have in your bank account. And then maybe think of all the bills you have coming. That's easy because that's thinking of appearance. That's thinking what you see in front of you. But to think that bank account just flowing with money and just money just floating all about you, that's difficult because that's not what's actually there. So it goes on to say, to think according to appearance is easy. To think truth, what you want, regardless of appearance, is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work man is called upon to perform. It takes more power to think truth, what we want, than anything else. He goes on to say, there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It's the hardest work in the world. Sustained consecutive thought of what you want, the truth, is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearance. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind, which observes it. And this can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth. So if you can hold the thought of that floating money, that abundance, that, feeling when you have plenty and you're not worried about paying your mortgage or paying the electric bill or paying the car, if you can think of that and see all that abundance of money and hold that vision, it must happen because that's the law. So when we are working towards something, there's this thing called the law of compensation. And the law of compensation works like this. Whatever you're doing, is there a need for what you do? What chances are, if you're doing it, there's a need for what you do. And then the second part is, are you good at what you're doing? That's something you can control. You can always get better at what you're doing. And then the third part of the law of compensation is the difficulty in replacing you. You need to make yourself so difficult to be replaced that you can control how much money you earn. Now, when I was teaching school, in the year I decided to retire, I got, sent in my letter and my intent to retire. Next thing I knew, they were sending somebody over to observe and to shadow me for a day because that was going to be my replacement. And then I thought, what if I changed my mind? It was like I didn't have a choice. So it was very easy to replace me, even though I thought I was pretty good at doing what I did. Very easy to be replaced. So you might want to get into a position where it's going to be more difficult to have you replaced. But only receiving, you're only going to receive in money your value. You see, I was at the top of my scale when I was teaching. It didn't matter what I did, I couldn't receive more money. It was a totally different system. But when you're in the marketplace, you can change that. So keep in mind, money and thoughts are both energy. And because they're both energy, they're constantly changing. And so what you have to do is make sure that your thinking is correct and your thoughts are moving on towards what you want. Okay. So here's another point. You won't achieve your goals until you know what it is that you want and becomes a burning desire. And so often we don't really know what our goal is. So set your goal and then maybe double it or triple it. Now that some of you that might scare you, you're like, well, I don't know how I do that. It doesn't matter how. Your job is to just figure out what it is you want. So I was in this one group and they were like, you should be able to earn X amount of dollars this year. And then I went to this other group and they said, you should be able to earn this amount of dollars. Well, that second amount was 4 times the first group. Now, I was able to figure out how I could earn the first set, but I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I got to change something if I'm going to earn 4 times as much, because that's what they said you should be able to do. Well, it has to become a belief. And that was a huge difference to go from one belief system to the next. But it's a matter of, okay, I have to shift my thoughts. I have to shift how I'm going to find all these people. And I need to get more serious about doing what I need to do. So you won't achieve your goal until you know what it is that you want. Okay. And we don't need to know the how. Hope you got that figured out. You don't need to know how you're going to earn the money. You just need to know the amount of money you want to earn. And the ideas will come to you. How do I know that? Because that's what's happened to me. And that's what happens. Walsty Wallace says that in his book. It works for everybody the same way. You just have to do the work. Sustained thinking. What most people are going to try to go away from that sustained thinking. So your success is all going to be based on your thought process and your belief. in order to change, you're going to have to change your thinking. That's why, it's really frustrating to me sometimes that people don't think that they need to shift their thinking. They just think they need to do something different. No, it's not what you need to do differently. It's what you need to think differently. And as you think differently, those to-do things become different. And when you get a burning desire, you become so much more productive. But it all starts with thought. You must think of what it is that you want. You must build that burning desire. You must implant that burning desire into your subconscious. How do you do it? Spaced repetition. And as you get that idea there, all of a sudden you become more productive. And you get more accomplished, and you can do more in a day than most people can do in a week, because you have a burning desire. You have more reason to get it done. It becomes a habit. There's a great article, and if anybody wants it, I'd be glad to send it to you. It's called The Common Denominator of Success. And in this article, it talks about how people that are highly successful don't necessarily like doing things that unsuccessful people or failures don't like to do. It's that they do them until it becomes a habit. And you see, once you turn something into a habit, you just do it. Just like brushing your teeth in the morning. I hope you brush your teeth in the morning. But when you brush your teeth in the morning, it just becomes a habit. It's something you do regardless. My kids used to laugh at me. If we had a snowstorm and we're going to be snowed in our house, or if we're, having a day where I'm, not necessarily feeling really good, it has become such a habit for me to just put on my makeup. So it's really rare that I don't put my makeup on first thing in the morning. And so my kids would kind of laugh at me like, Mom, where are you going today? There's 3 feet of snow outside. We, can't even get out of the house. And you see, it became such a habit to just put my makeup on. I was like, but I have to look at me. I look in the mirror. I want to see the look I want. Now, not everybody feels that way, and that's fine. And I certainly don't judge people that don't put on makeup. But that became such a habit, just like brushing my teeth was putting on my makeup. And I remember one time going to work and I forgot to put my makeup on. I don't know how that happened. And I was like horrified. I was like, what was I thinking? What thought process was interrupting my habit that day? Because that's the only thing that's going to change that kind of a habit, is something interrupted it. There was another time, my husband, I didn't realize this, but he would listen for my hair dryer. And when he'd hear my hair dryer, he knew it was time for him to get up, because that gave him enough time to get ready and go to work. Well, one day I decided to change when I dried my hair. I'd always dry my hair first and then do my makeup. And this day I decided that doesn't make sense. I should do my makeup first and then dry my hair. Well, I had no idea he was listening for my hair dryer. So he gets up and he's going to be late. He has to hurry so fast to get ready because he was listening for my hair dryer. See, those habits control us. So the actions you do cause the reactions. Well, when you've got a burning desire and when you have shifted your thought process, you start to do different actions, and therefore you start to have different reactions. And the results you get are always a direct reflection on how you're thinking and feeling. So when you're not feeling really good about something, you need to start shifting your thoughts so that you start shifting your actions. Now, some days it's harder to do than others. I know one day, just the other day, I had an early morning doctor's appointment, and I was feeling so good from that doctor's appointment. And it was like, even though I had wonderful, results to my doctor's appointment, it shifted my thinking for the day, and I just wasn't as productive. So you're going to have days like that. Don't beat yourself up about them. Just know that the next day, you're going to have to do something a little different. So your perception of a situation is also controlled by your thought process. So make sure that you start to look at different perspectives, because that will start allowing you to perceive things in different ways. And that's what you need. You need to open your mind. You need to release your thinking that things always have to be in a certain way. They do not. There are many different options. I want you to keep in mind this one thing. If you're not the person you want to be, it's because you're not on the frequency. And so you're going to have to shift, and you cannot shift your outside world until you first have shifted your inside world, hence the name of the show, Your Inside Power. You can't work hard enough on the image you hold of yourself, because the image you hold of yourself is going to reflect to the world, but it also reflects to the vibration that you're on. So you need to make sure that you change your thinking so that you're on the vibration of the goal that you want. The energy we give off reflects our attitude. So you need to be thinking of the person you need to be. So for instance, myself, I need to be thinking of the person on that income level where I want to be, because that person on that higher income level does not think like the person on the lower income level. There's two different thought processes there. Well, which one do I want? Well, I want the higher one. So now I've got to shift my thinking, shift my vibration, so that I'm thinking thoughts that a person at that higher income level would earn. Why not? That's what you want. So your results attract on the frequency that you're on. So if you're not getting the results you want, you're not on the right frequency. And that's all the problem is, because when you're on that right frequency, you attract everything that's in harmony to you. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please reach out. And I'd love to have you join my Facebook group. You can go to Facebook and look for Millionaire Mindset and find my name, Patty Stepler or Patricia Stepler, and join my group, because that's the best way to connect with me, or find me on LinkedIn and connect with me that way. And reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Love to show you how to keep your mind shifted so that you get the results that you want. I want you to be the magic in your dreams.